North Korea has done it again. In the dead of night, from a remote launch site hidden within its rugged mountains, Pyongyang fired a missile that sent shockwaves across the globe. State television framed it as another milestone in their path to military self-reliance. But outside North Korea's tightly controlled borders, the test raised a far more chilling question. Just how close did this launch bring the regime to being able to strike U.S. bases in the Pacific? The event was not just another missile test. It was a demonstration, a warning, and a message carefully timed for maximum impact. North Korea's missile program has evolved from crude rockets that once splashed harmlessly into the Sea of Japan, into a sophisticated arsenal of intercontinental systems capable of traveling thousands of kilometers. This recent test was not about symbolism alone. It was about precision, range, and the terrifying reality that U.S. forces stationed across Asia may now be within striking distance. To understand the significance, we must first rewind to the roots of North Korea's obsession with missile technology. For decades, the regime has poured scarce resources into its weapons programs, even as its citizens faced hunger and economic hardship. The missile program has become more than a military asset. It is the lifeline of the regime itself, the tool through which it demands recognition on the world stage. And in a world where nuclear deterrence often decides survival, North Korea believes that only a credible missile force can guarantee the continuation of its dynasty. The latest test, analysts say, likely involved a long-range ballistic missile with the potential to reach not only South Korea or Japan, but also U.S. military installations on Guam. Guam has long been at the center of North Korea's threats, a strategic American hub in the Pacific housing bombers, submarines, and a vital forward presence. By demonstrating a trajectory that could simulate a strike on Guam, Pyongyang was making its message unmistakable. American bases are no longer safe outposts. They are targets. What makes this test particularly alarming is not only the distance the missile traveled, but the manner in which it was conducted. North Korea used a lofted trajectory, firing the missile almost straight up into space before it arced down into the sea. This high-altitude path ensures that the missile doesn't overshoot into another nation's territory, but it also allows engineers to study its full re-entry capabilities. In simpler terms, Pyongyang was testing whether its warhead could survive the intense heat and stress of plunging back through the atmosphere at intercontinental speeds. That survival is the final piece in a deadly puzzle. If a warhead can endure re-entry intact, then in theory, it could deliver a nuclear payload across oceans, onto American soil, or at the very least, onto U.S. military bases abroad. And while Washington has long maintained that its missile defense systems are capable of intercepting such threats, no defense network is perfect. The more North Korea tests, the more accurate its missiles become, and the higher the risk that one day a launch could bypass those defenses. The international reaction was swift. Tokyo reported that the missile's fragments splashed down dangerously close to Japanese waters, forcing airliners to divert and raising alarm across the region. Seoul convened emergency security meetings, while Washington condemned the launch as reckless and destabilizing. Yet beyond the official statements, the reality was clear. North Korea had crossed another threshold in its march toward credible long-range strike capability. But the question that rattled military planners was not just about range, it was about intent. Why now? Why conduct such a provocative test at this particular moment? Some experts point to the internal calendar of the regime, where anniversaries of leadership and key party milestones often coincide with dramatic military displays. Others suggest it was a direct response to U.S. and South Korean military exercises, which Pyongyang routinely describes as rehearsals for invasion. Whatever the reason, the timing was deliberate, and the message was unmistakable. North Korea is prepared to show strength whenever it feels cornered. And this is where the danger intensifies, because each test is not only about perfecting technology, it's about escalation. With every missile launched, North Korea signals to its adversaries that it is willing to gamble, to push boundaries, to to risk confrontation. And each time the international community fails to respond with a unified front, Pyongyang grows bolder, convinced that its strategy of brinkmanship is working. So how close did this missile really come to U.S. bases? How realistic is the threat that North Korea could actually deliver a nuclear strike against American forces in the Pacific? These are not abstract questions. They are the very calculations shaping defense policy in Washington, Tokyo, and Seoul. Because the truth is, this test may have revealed far more than North Korea intended. Intelligence sources suggest that U.S. satellites tracked not only the missile's path, but also signs of technological upgrades, advances in propulsion, re-entry shielding, and perhaps even multiple warhead designs. If confirmed, this would mark a dangerous leap forward, shrinking the margin of error for defense planners and tightening the noose around America's Pacific strongholds. And as we move deeper into the story, we begin to uncover the real stakes, not just for the region, but for the balance of power across the entire world. Readiness. That word has now become the center of Washington's calculations. Because while North Korea's tests are designed to intimidate, their very frequency suggests something more unsettling, an intent to normalize the threat. Each launch desensitizes the region, making the extraordinary feel routine. And yet behind the facade of routine lies a sharpened blade, growing closer to being unsheathed. For U.S. military planners, the question has shifted from if North Korea could launch an attack to when it might decide the gamble is worth taking. Bases in Guam, Okinawa, and South Korea are not just symbolic targets. They are the linchpins of American power projection in Asia. Strike them effectively, and the U.S. deterrence posture weakens overnight. The balance of power in the Pacific would tilt in ways not seen since the end of World War II. That is why Washington has doubled down on missile defense. The island of Guam has been ringed with advanced systems like the THAAD interceptor batteries, designed to knock out incoming warheads in mid-flight. Japan continues to upgrade its Aegis destroyers, ships capable of launching precision interceptors at missiles soaring high above the atmosphere. And in South Korea, U.S. Patriot systems stand as the last line of defense. But every system has its limits. Interceptors are expensive, finite, and vulnerable to saturation. If North Korea were to launch not one missile, but dozens in a coordinated salvo, the defenders might find themselves overwhelmed. This is precisely the nightmare scenario Pyongyang has been rehearsing. Military analysts believe North Korea's ultimate strategy is not necessarily to fight and win a war against the United States. It knows that would be impossible. Instead, the goal is to create just enough doubt, just enough risk, that Washington hesitates before acting. Deterrence through fear. A gamble that a handful of nuclear-tipped missiles could paralyze America's will to intervene in a crisis on the Korean peninsula. But the story doesn't end at defense, because for every North Korean launch, there is an equally powerful diplomatic ripple. China, long considered Pyongyang's reluctant patron, finds itself in a tightening bind. Beijing wants stability on its borders, but it also sees strategic advantage in a United States distracted by the North Korean threat. Russia, meanwhile, has quietly strengthened ties with Kim Jong-un's regime, trading technology and political cover for badly needed arms as it wages war in Ukraine. What emerges is a tangled web where North Korea, once isolated, now leverages global rivalries to shield itself from maximum pressure. The danger here is escalation by miscalculation. Imagine this scenario. North Korea launches a missile on a high trajectory, claiming it is a test. The missile passes over Japan, sparking panic, and debris lands within a few dozen miles of a U.S. base. Washington, uncertain of intent, debates a response. Tokyo demands action. Seoul mobilizes its forces. Within hours, a cycle of military alerts could spiral into confrontation, and in the fog of rapid decisions, a single misstep could ignite a regional war with global consequences. Yet despite the risks, diplomacy continues to sputter. North Korea refuses to engage in meaningful talks without sanctions relief. while Washington insists denuclearization must remain the ultimate goal. The stalemate leaves only one arena where North Korea can speak loudly: the missile range. Each launch is both a scientific test and a political statement, a reminder to the world that Kim Jong-un cannot be ignored. But how sustainable is this strategy? North Korea's economy remains crippled, its population heavily restricted, and its future uncertain. The missiles buy the regime time, leverage, and bargaining power, but they cannot solve the deeper crisis within its borders. And yet, for the leadership in Pyongyang, survival today is worth any price tomorrow. Music deepens, narrator's voice steadies. So we return to the original question: how close did this missile get to U.S. bases? The answer is unsettlingly clear: close enough to prove capability, close enough to erode confidence in defenses, and close enough to remind the world that a single order from Pyongyang could change history in minutes. For viewers watching from afar, it may seem like a distant chess match of strategy and technology. But for the soldiers stationed on Guam, for the citizens of Tokyo, Seoul, and even Honolulu, the threat is not abstract. It is immediate, hanging overhead with every test. And perhaps that is North Korea's true victory, not the missile itself, but the shadow it casts. A shadow long enough to reach across oceans, darkening every calculation made in Washington, Tokyo, and beyond. The story of North Korea's missile program is not finished. Each launch is a chapter, each test a new warning. The question is not whether the world is listening, but whether it is prepared to act before the final chapter is written. This is the razor's edge of modern geopolitics. A regime armed with nuclear ambitions, a superpower determined to contain it, and millions of lives balanced on the trajectory of a single missile. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth breakdowns of global security threats. Because in a world where one launch can change everything, staying informed is no longer optional. It's essential.